talk a little bit about some of the myths in gymnastics? I know for myself, I'll just sort of tee one up. There was this myth that you could literally never take a day off. I mean, I trained 6 days a week, like that was the worst thing you could do. And for every day off, it took, 2 to 3 days to get back where you were. Where does that come from? That's not true in any other sport.
Yeah. I think the myth that you're talking about of the no days off stuff like that comes from, there's no scientific peer-reviewed crosstalk. It's an echo chamber, right? And so I've experienced this as an athlete myself. And then earlier in my career, I was fortunate to travel a lot and speak with not only people in the US, but also in other countries. And when you really ask people, why do you do this? Like, give me a good rationale for this. It's like, well, this is what works for this person, or this worked for this gym, or this was it. And for some things, that's okay. Technique, right? Like your Chanko technique or something. But for 90% of the rest of gymnastics with strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery, all that stuff, you should go to peer-reviewed literature, and you should have a board of people following. That's what medical science does. That's why we know when you have an injury, how to treat you, right? And so that's a huge glaring problem that has to be fixed in gymnastics. And I think until that fixes, there's no way out. But there's literally no science to support not taking any days off, and especially like not having a relative off season after championships, right? Or using that. And I'm lucky to have some friends that are at that level, and they're like, I feel the best I've ever felt after the coronavirus, break.
Because they've had a break.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even you walking in the gym and saying you want to coach, you had experience as a gymnast, which is a lot more than some. I mean, my coaches were never even gymnasts. They said, "You want to open a gym." And so there's just there's no relatability to what it feels like. I mean, forget about the injuries, but just sort of how to mentally understand the sport and get yourself to, it's like their ability to remove themselves from that, I think they think makes them better, but it's just such a lack of understanding.
There's no empathy.
But every time I broke an ankle or a bone, the cast came off many days early, if not weeks early, and I started training when it was already broken and when it was still broken, and then I just broke the other side.
Yeah. That's a classic example of people who are so far outside their scope, it's ridiculous, right? Like, and I still struggle with this too, not into a same degree, but like sometimes there's people who push back on me in terms of like recommendations I make, or so I had someone once tell me that the best MRI machine in Boston was wrong, and that fracture really wasn't there. A coach said that to me, and I was like, yes, the $50,000 imaging study is wrong, right? And it's just like people who are maybe insecure, and I was like this as a coach. Like when I had a big ego, like I didn't want to be proven wrong. I wanted people, I wanted to be the man, and so I had a big ego, and I never was that brash about it. But I think that's what happens is people get insecure and they get a little fearful about, the perfect opportunity going away. And so they start bending the rules a little bit. But the first point is like when somebody makes an against a, that's why we need an interdisciplinary team of people caring for the athlete. But I feel this way when I coach too, right? Like if someone has a sore ankle and we're talking about flipping a vault, I have to take a step back and say like, am I trying to have this athlete flip this big skill because it shows on me as a coach and I'm tying my self-worth to the athlete, or is it because I generally care about them, right? And that's the problem. When you tie your sense of self-worth to your athletes and their accomplishments, you can't make clear decisions. And so that was a huge revelation for me. It was like, I have to get my self-esteem and my happiness, not from how well my athletes do and how many level 10s we have, but like just being a good person,
That requires a degree of introspection that I worry isn't really available to many. Another aspect of the sport, in women's anyway, that is particularly damaging is obviously issues around eating and eating disorders. And I wrote about this in my book, and everybody said, oh, it's changed. It's not like that anymore. And, I've met so many athletes over the decades. I now am very grateful to call athletes friends that literally just retired yesterday and, across all the decades. And every single one I talk to comes out with some sort of disordered eating or body dysmorphia. And so I don't believe at all that it's changed.
Yeah.
And I wonder, one, how does that disordered behavior around eating and nutrition contribute to injuries in your mind? Because I would imagine it does.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. And one is this is the clearest example of when someone who doesn't know what they're talking about and isn't licensed to profession should never even have this conversation like this. And the thought that it's gone away is complete garbage, because I talk to people every single day that are still struggling that last week with this issue, myself when I was in college included. So it's definitely still a real issue. Yeah. But I think this is a situation where, number one, like people have this misunderstanding in our sport that the equation for progress is work plus work plus work equals progress, right? And there's literally no literature to support that in any scientific journal ever, right? It's the optimal dose of work plus the optimal dose of recovery that equals progress, and that equals
They think
time.
it's work plus work minus food, I think.
Yeah, right, exactly. And this is what happened, is that, like, I think what people lack in education, they make up for in intensity, or they bend the rules and do something unethical. And so someone's not making progress, they're not getting skills, and the person who's not trained and has the wrong moral intent blames it on the athlete and says, well, it's because you're too heavy. If you just lost some weight, you'd catch your Tkachev. And in that moment, the person standing next to them should be like, that is the worst thing I've ever heard, and you need to leave right now, right? But in the second part of it is that if you don't have the skill set to get proper strength and conditioning and proper flexibility and proper, cardio energy systems, if you don't know these are entire fields of study. People spend their entire life studying these things. And if you don't have the knowledge to do it, you can't make up a reason why someone is not going to be successful and pin it on nutrition. Like, one comment can make somebody spiral into darkness. And I think that coaches need to really understand the gravity of that. But I think
it's so maddening to me, because all of the things you're talking about, proper healing, proper conditioning, proper nutrition, would lead to better results. Like, I don't know why the sport has convinced itself that it doesn't line up with winning, when it would actually produce better results, and you'd have more longevity from these great athletes. And there's so many great ones that we lose because of either injuries or eating disorders or psychological trauma from both of those things and more. And so I feel like beating my head against the wall. I don't understand why, and so much of it, the eating disorder thing and the weight thing is like, it's this accepted aesthetic. I mean, they argue that you have to be lighter, but I think it's more driven by aesthetics than anything, even though I don't know that the sport and the coaches are willing to admit it. It's like, this is what a successful gymnast looks like.
Yeah. No, I would completely agree. I completely agree. And I think when I listened to 30 for 30 podcast, and it really opened my eyes. I had to listen to those on really long runs because I was getting so pissed off. But like, when I listened to what was going on with some of those motives about, why are we saying 12 is when we got to push really hard? Why so small? Why? And there was there's no reason. Evidence at all. Like, oh, it's better to spot. Like, okay, better to control. That's what you meant? Or like, better to push around, right? Like, and not everyone was doing this. And I think there are people who are trying to push uphill against the grain, but that is a mountain to push uphill against when the system is trying to say no, no, no. And now we all know why maybe that was the incentive. But there's nothing to support that a tinier, underfed, lighter gymnast is going to tolerate. The forces are 15 times your body weight on floor when you tumble. It's an equation. And like, if you're not well fed and well rested and well trained, you're going to fall apart. You know what I mean? And then it goes like that, and they blame, you're not trying hard enough, you're not working hard enough, blah, blah, blah. And frankly, it's all crap.
I mean, that creates the trauma, which I sort of explained you think you're working really hard. You're told you're a lazy piece of garbage. You think your ankle hurts and you're told you're lazy. You think that you're starving and you're told that you're fat. And then you're upside down psychologically, because you trust your own perception of the world anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so damaging to enter, and disorienting to enter the world that way. The eating disorder piece also, I think, like the injuries, I thought would be contained to the gym, and once I left and I just didn't tumble on my ankle anymore, it'd be fine. I thought, once I'm not weighed in twice a day and told to lose weight by any means necessary, I'll just go out and be a normal person and think normally about my body. But no, that does not happen.
Not at all.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen the lasting impacts of this. It's a very difficult recovery. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that this is something that's really hard, is that, like, on the medical side, because of HIPAA, I don't like to share any of the people I work with or all that stuff. But like, if someone could be a fly in the wall for some of the stories that people come to me with their post gymnastics, they're like junior, seniors in college after an elite career or something like that. And it's like, I have trouble putting my pants on. I have trouble, like, going to the bathroom. I have issues with that. It's like, I'm scared to have a kid down the road because of what I went through the last 10 years. And they're like, really, like, the parents are almost in tears. Like, was this worth it? You know what I mean? Like, especially the pursuit of a scholarship sometimes is like, is the collateral damage worth what we're going on? Because now I don't like my body. I don't like the relationship with food. I'm scared to do this. Like, it really, it plagues their entire life. And it's not everybody, really, right? But it's a huge problem we're not talking about. And the research does not reflect it. I want to be clear about that, like, no one's going to report how injured they were and how they had eating disorders on a survey, especially if they know people are watching. So all the statistics on injuries and stuff are wildly underrated, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you have hope, though. I guess I'm going to ask you to leave us with a little bit of hope because you're
Yeah.
seeing progress.
I didn't in 2016. I'll be frankly honest. I was gonna hang it all up, and I almost just sold my company. I was like, I'm done. I'm good with this, you know. But the athletes give me hope. I do a lot of my work for the athletes because I see the 17-year-old who comes to me with a hip surgery that has a college scholarship on the line, and their coach is actually ready to do whatever is necessary to get them back. And I'm there, and they actually go on to have an incredibly successful career in college. And like the experience they have when they come back and they're working out at our facility is so heartwarming. And like I still coach a bunch of girls at my gym that I'm like, man, we're making a positive dent in your life. And I think that's there. But also there's a lot of coaches that give me hope. Like Nick Ruddick is a perfect example. Like him and I he's a really good friend of mine, and he was on the same dark spiral path, but he changed a lot and he's made a big impact. So I think there are coaches out there that are really doing the hard work silently. And that's the last thing I think we really need to do is not only we do need to hold those who are doing something wrong accountable, but there are good people who we need to be like, listen to them. They're doing the right thing. And that gives other people hope, because we know at the national level, it's a trickle down. If it's negative and toxic and miserable, the clubs are like that. So if we get people who are positive and inspiring and do the right thing, the clubs change as well. And so I think that's really important. But I have a little bit more hope.
But yeah, culture change is really hard. But I think if leadership at the NGB level, at the gym level, held up those coaches who were examples of positive coaching, who supported their kids, you know, mind and body, and we celebrated those coaches instead of the ones who are often celebrated that are that's absolutely what needs to happen, and I'm grateful you've continued. Thank you.
I'm happy to do it.